The evening it happened was thick with the scent of rain and the dark promise of a storm. My opium pipe lay on the cluttered table beside me, a remnant of my attempts to dull the vivid images of the departed that haunted my dreams. Opium was my companion, my confidant, and my escape, much like Poe, whose tales of terror often felt like kindred spirits to my own nocturnal escapades. I had been called to a remote manor, an old, crumbling estate owned by the formidable and once respected Ravenscroft family. They had lost their last heir, young Master Edward, to a mysterious ailment that had drained the life from him in a matter of days. They wanted me to photograph him before the body was laid to rest, to capture his last visage for their mourning hearts. Poor little fellow. At least his body would be laid to rest in one of the finest coffins known to man. My worst fear was to find my final resting place in some shoddy container which would allow all manner of wild nature and vermin to readily feast upon my tender remains. The room where Edward was kept was dimly lit by flickering candles, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to dance with the remnants of his spirit. His body was arranged upright on a fashionable settee with meticulous care, dressed in fine clothes that seemed out of place on his pale, sunken frame. But it was his face that drew me in, a face frozen in a grotesque grin, as if mocking death itself. I set up my camera, the cumbersome apparatus feeling heavier than usual in the oppressive air. As I prepared the shot, my eyes kept wandering back to Edward's smile. It was unnerving, unsettling in a way that made the hairs on the back of my neck prickle. I shook my head, attributing the feelings to my nerves and the lingering effects of the opium. With everything in place, I peered through the lens, adjusting the focus on Edward's face. That's when I saw it, the subtlest twitch of his lips. I blinked hard, convinced it was a trick of my weary mind. But as I continued to watch, the smile seemed to grow wider, the lips parting slightly to reveal teeth that looked far too white against the decaying flesh. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I told myself it was the opium, playing with my senses. The poorly illuminated room proved quite difficult to properly light my subject, and I relied primarily on a small candle which adorned an empty wine bottle. It sat on a small side table to my right to provide illumination for my immediate tasks. I adjusted the camera, trying to concentrate, but my hands were trembling. Edward's body, lifeless and cold, was beginning to look disturbingly animated. His eyes, once closed, were now slightly open, revealing a glimmer of milky white. I backed away, my pulse quickening, but my professional pride wouldn't let me abandon the task. I moved closer again, reluctantly peering through the lens. This time, Edward's head seemed to have tilted ever so slightly in my direction. His eyes, those rotten, vacant eyes, were now staring directly at me through the camera. I stumbled backward, knocking over the candle. Panic surged through me as the flame sputtered out, plunging the room into deeper shadows. The camera stood as a barrier between us, yet I felt as though it offered no protection. I could hear the faintest sound, like the creaking of old wooden floorboards. Gathering the last shreds of my courage, I looked through the lens once more. Edward's grinning face was now much closer, impossibly so. His hand, which had been resting by his side, was now reaching out toward the camera, toward me. The air was thick with the smell of decay and opium, mingling into a nauseating stench that made my head spin. The last thing I saw was Edward's face, his eyes boring into mine through the lens, his smile stretched impossibly wide. Then everything went black, and the world fell away into a void of eternal darkness. Yet sound, eerily, remained with me. When they found me the next day, lying beside my toppled camera, they said I looked as though I had seen a ghost. But I knew better. I had seen something far worse. Something that had followed me from the realms of the dead, bridging the gap between life and death in the most horrific way imaginable. It was as if young Master Edward had targeted me with a boomerang of lethal irony, showing me what was so god-awful grand about photographing the dead. I was unresponsive and pronounced brain dead by a local doctor. When my wife visited me while I was in the home of a poor widow woman the Ravenscroft family had sent me to, I learned of my fate. I heard her arguing with my caregiver that I should be taken off of all sustenance, as a doctor would soon come to pronounce me dead. "We have little ones at home who need our money far more than poor Jacob here," she wailed. Eventually, her complaints received traction with the local magistrates, and I was invariably pronounced dead and placed in a mass grave. The last sounds that consumed me were large clumps of what I assumed to be dirt and lime raining down upon the burlap sack that covered my still dying body.